Hi, it's Eric from Real World Readiness. Let's talk about unexpected power failures. Electricity is something we take for granted in the modern world. Turn a light switch on, the lights come on. Plug something into an outlet, it works. Push the button for the heat kicks on. But what if it doesn't? In this video, I'm going to get you prepared for a power outage. We're going to learn how to be safe and ready and comfortable in any power outage, whether it's a couple weeks, a couple days, a couple hours, a couple months, or even a long-term power outage. I'd also love to hear what you guys have done to make your readiness better at your homes. Any ideas you have, please drop them in the comments after you watch the video. All right, let's get started. Let's talk about your initial action. Let's say you're sitting around your house, minding your own business, poof, everything powers down. All right, what do you do first? First thing is, if it's dark, get yourself some light. Whether it's a small rechargeable flashlight you keep next to where you sit, or even the light on your cell phone, if you have that in your pocket, that's got a little flashlight built into it. The reason for that is you want to make sure you don't start off your power outage evolution by tripping over the coffee table or spraining your ankle stepping on the dog in the dark. So you get your little light to get you to your bigger light sources so you can assess the situation. We'll talk about light a little bit more here in a minute. It's time to start thinking about what is the scope and likely duration of this outage that we're going to be dealing with. Some ways to do that initially and quickly is to peek out your window, see if the neighbor's house has power, see if the light on the garage is still on, see if the street lamps are on. If those things are out, you know it's not just your home. If the neighbor's houses are on and it's just your home, you have a localized problem. It's going to be a lot less of an emergency than if everything else is out. Next thing you can do is see if you still have cell phone service. If you do, you can use your cell phone to look at your power company and report the outage, and also see if anyone else has reported it. And as it develops, you can see if they acknowledge it and state what happened, the scope of it, how long it's going to take to fix, kind of get an idea of how long it's going to be. If your cell phones are out, that's indicative of possibly a bigger problem. And you may need to get another source of information. Some other sources of information, especially initially, is your car radio. Remember, your car is not hooked up to the grid, obviously, so you can go turn your car on, listen to the radio, find the news station, see if there's anything coming over the airwaves about that. You can also use a weather radio or an emergency backup radio, which we've had a video, which I'll link here. But you can use a weather radio to find the information, because if it's a serious event, if it's a major event, then the NOAA weather radio channels will broadcast emergency updates over the weather bands. Also, most of them have an AM/FM band as well, so you can find the regular bands. All right, let's run through some of the issues that are going to arise when you don't have electricity in your life. The most obvious one is light. Obviously, all your electric lights are not going to work without the power being on. So you're going to have alternate light sources. We already talked about your cell phone with the little light, flashlight that's built into it. That's a great one. You have that with you. Flashlights are another obvious solution. Flashlights and headlamps. These you should have more than one, because if you have one, it's going to break. What they say when I was in the service, one is none, two is one. So you want at least several, two or three. And with the flashlights and smaller lights, they're cheap. You can pick them up one at a time here and there, and just put them around the house. Have them in the couple in the kitchen, have one in the living room, have one in the bedroom, have a couple in the hall closet. That way, no matter where you are in the house, there's a light handy. And you also have some backups. I like to have a mix of rechargeable LED lights and battery-powered lights. Outside of your electric lights, there are some traditional forms of lighting. One of my favorites, in fact, when I have a power outage in my place, this is my go-to, is I have kerosene lanterns. Well, they're not kerosene lanterns, they're oil lanterns, but they can burn kerosene. They also burn lamp oil, which is specifically made for them. And that's actually what I have. I make sure I have 2 or 3 gallons of lamp oil on hand. I have 4 kerosene lanterns. They make a beautiful light. They're soothing. They're pleasant to be around. And they burn a long time on a little bit of oil. In that same vein as candles. Candle here is a 50-hour survival candle. I don't know if it's that much longer than a regular candle, but it advertises a 50-hour burn time. It makes a nice light. Also, this big candle with all the wicks that my wife had picked up at TJ Maxx is a great candle as well. This thing's going to burn for a long time. But here's the thing with candles and oil lamps. They're obviously fire. An oil lamp is full of oil, so if you break it and the oil gets all over, it can be a massive fire hazard. They say the Great Chicago Fire 100 years ago was started by a cow kicking over an oil lamp. So if you're going to use open flame light sources like candles and lamps, make sure that you also have fire protection, have fire extinguishers, have a fire blanket, know where they are, know how to use them, and know how to get them in service fast. And be careful with your fire, because the last thing you want is to burn your house down on top of having the power outage. Not too far behind light, one of the main things that we use electricity for is to climate control and comfort. It would even go so far as to say it goes beyond comfort in the modern world. Air conditioning and heat, both, depending on what season you're talking about when this power outage happens, both of those items can be life critical, especially for elderly people or people that are ill. Let's talk about winter first. Winter, I think, is probably the harder of the two to keep up with, at least in the northern states. I guess if you're down in the deep south, it's not as big a deal. Your furnace isn't going to work without power. Almost every furnace out there is going to require power, and even pellet stoves, most of those require power to power the auger as well. So for me, your ideal heat source for a backup, I use mine for primary, but for a backup heat source at least is to have a wood stove available, a wood stove or a fireplace, and enough firewood to feed it for an extended period of time. Even if it's not your primary source, you should have enough wood that you can burn that for several weeks or a month at minimum and provide heat. Now, if you don't use wood heat as a primary source, make sure you haven't neglected to have a way to start a fire. Make sure that you have some tinder or fire lighter, some kindling, and make sure that you've done it before and it's been sitting, or you bought the house with it and you've never used it. Have somebody professional come and look at it, because with wood stoves, another hazard is that the chimney, if it's not in good shape, if the stove itself isn't in good shape, you could wind up with a chimney fire, and that is bad news. Some other options, because not everybody can have a wood stove. Sometimes it's an expense issue, sometimes you're not allowed to have them. Like even here in Montana where I live, I can have a wood stove. But if you live in the city limits of Missoula, Montana, you can't, because it's an inversion zone. The city has said you can't have a new wood stove in the city limits of Missoula. So maybe you're in a place where you can't have a wood burner, or it's not practical for you to have one. There are some other options in those situations. Probably one of the best, and you'll see this a lot if you are looking at prepper groups and Facebook groups and things like that. I personally haven't used one, but a lot of people like the Buddy series indoor propane heaters. They're supposed to be a very top-notch product. They work great. You can burn them inside without worrying about carbon monoxide, and they go through gas at a reasonable rate. You want to have the heater and enough gas to power it for a significant period of time. But it's important to note that you can't use just any propane heater inside the house. Most propane heaters are not safe to use in a house unless they're specifically designed for it. Burning propane creates carbon monoxide, which is a deadly gas and will kill you. Every time there's a power outage in a major urban area, people die from carbon monoxide poisoning using the wrong heat. The same goes for barbecue grills, camp stoves, other propane burning appliances. They are not meant for heaters. They're not meant to burn inside the house, and it's dangerous to use them for heating inside of your house. There are some things you can do to mitigate the lack of ability to use your normal heating system. One of them is to close off the parts of the house you're not using. The spaces you're living in, the spaces where you have your heat source, you can close the rest of the house and not have to heat the whole thing and conserve the heat that you have in the spaces that you're actually living in. You could put your window coverings up. If you have blinds or curtains, go ahead and close them. If you don't, put blankets over your windows, and that'll keep the cold air from coming in through the windows, and also keep the windows from sucking the heat out of the house. And another thing you can do, this is a neat trick somebody told me about that I wouldn't have thought of on my own, but a lot of times when the power is out in a cold area, you can put a tent up inside your house, either in your bedroom or in your room that you do have a heat source in, and sleep inside the tent inside the house. And what that'll do is the tent will keep your body heat inside the tent, so you don't lose all that heat out to the ambient environment while you're sleeping, and you'll be able to stay a lot warmer while you're sleeping and be a lot more comfortable and be better rested and just all around happier. Losing your power in the summertime has a whole different set of challenges than it does losing it in the wintertime. Now heat is your enemy. Try and keep your house cool without air conditioning or any mechanical means like fans or anything like that. It's not as critical for a large part of the country as the cold is, but there are parts of the country where it's very hot, and the extreme heat inside a residence can actually be a life-threatening condition. One of the ways you can control the heat inside your house or an apartment even is by controlling your windows to capture the cold air that you can and keep out the warm air that you can. So in the morning, especially early morning, open your windows, keep them open throughout the night even, let that cool night air come into the house. Then as the outside temperature starts to rise, close your windows. especially on the sunny side of the house, and trap that cool air inside of the house. Then as the day wears on and it gets hot, keep that hot air outside. Open up your windows again in the evening. When the air starts to cool off, let the cool air come back in. Try to use your windows strategically to capture breezes. If the wind's blowing, open windows on opposite sides of the house, the direction the wind is blowing, and let the breeze blow through, and that'll help cool you off as well. Another thing you can do to help is do as much of your cooking outside as possible. Cook on a grill or a camp stove outside of your residence so you don't build up that extra heat inside where you're trying to keep a little cooler. Another issue you may have with the power failure is the issue of getting enough potable water. If you're in the country and you're on a well, chances are your well pump is electric and it will not supply pressurized water to your house, of course, when the power is not on. In the city, you'll often have water pressure after a power outage because the city will usually have a backup power source for the water plants. However, in a long power outage or something caused by a natural disaster, or like I said, a longer, more extended time period, that may fail around a fuel. You may not have your water available. So that's something you need to plan for. I did a whole video on water storage and filtration. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to it here, hopefully, and you can check that out and get a lot more detailed information on water. But the short version is you should have at least 3 days worth of water per person stored. That's a minimum. You should have more than that if you can, and by that I mean about a gallon of water per day per person. That's supposed to cover drinking, hygiene, and cooking. That's not going to be enough water. You're going to want more than that, so store as much water as you can. You should also have filtration options, so if you do run out of water, you can get water from your surrounding environment and you can clean it, make it suitable, fit to drink, fit to use for replenishing your supply. If you have lost power and you're on a municipal system and you still have water pressure, it'd be a really good idea to go ahead and put as much water as you can into containers in case you do lose that pressure later on. Another thing you may have issues with without electricity is cooking. Now, if you have a gas range, it may or may not work. It used to be that a gas range would work without power. Now it depends on the control system. Like in my place, my propane stove, the burners work, but I can't use the oven because it's computer controlled. But if you have an electric stove or a microwave, they're just not going to work without power. Some other options are cooking on your barbecue, cooking on a gas camp stove, cooking on a gas barbecue, or even cooking outside over a wood fire. And I recommend if you're going to use that as your plan, then do that a few times before a power outage so that you're familiar with it. You know how to do it. It's not an unusual thing. You're not learning a new thing on top of everything else going on in the world. One note about that, again, I'm going to mention carbon monoxide. Don't use a barbecue grill or a camp stove or anything like that that's not meant to be used indoors because they all produce carbon monoxide. And again, that stuff is really bad. You don't want that in your house. Right alongside of cooking is food storage and food availability if the power goes out. For a short power outage, it might not be a big deal. If it's a couple hours, it's not going to matter. But what if your power's out for a couple of days or weeks or even a long-term power outage, month or more? Having food stored ahead of time is going to be a huge deal because everybody else that didn't store food is going to be after the same food that's in the stores, which may not even be able to sell food without their point of sale systems up and running. In the initial part of the power outage, you want to make sure that the food in your freezer and in your refrigerator are utilized to the best extent possible. Obviously, those items won't work without power, so minimize opening and closing those as much as possible. If you can get down to a corner store and get ice, do that immediately because everybody's going to think of ice eventually, and when you get there too late, it's going to all be gone. So go down and buy ice to put in your freezer and your refrigerator as soon as you possibly can. And then also, you're going to want to eat the food that's in the refrigerator the soonest. It's going to go bad the soonest, so consume it first before it goes bad. That way you can use those calories and they're not wasted. But after a little while, it's either going to go bad or you're going to have consumed it all and you're going to have to move on to other food sources. That's talking about canned food, it's talking about dry goods, that's talking about prepackaged items that won't go bad sitting on the shelf at room temperature. Have as much of that stored up as you can. We'll do another video about food storage and food preparation at another time, but for now, just try and have as much as you can possible. Now, it doesn't have to be a big expense all at once. The best way to do this is to, when you're grocery shopping, if you're buying cans of soup and you need 2, pick up 3, put 1 in the cupboard. If you buy a couple of cans or a couple of boxes of something every time you're at the grocery store, before you know it, you'll have a month's worth of food stored away in the back of the pantry. Another option is to get specifically
designed food for disasters or long-term storage food like backpacking foods or freeze-dried meals or emergency food that you can buy from survival stores or outdoor stores. Some of this food is able to last 20 to 25 years just sitting in a cool, dark place, and it's still going to be perfectly fine to eat. Remember, the more food you have, the more options you have, and the more time you have to figure out what you need to do. Don't forget entertainment. So much of what we do for entertainment is electronic these days, between your TV and your cable and the internet and playing with your phone. We're pretty dependent on electricity to keep ourselves from being bored. We're not used to being bored, especially if you have small children. But even if you don't, you should have some ideas ahead of time of what you're going to do to pass the time and make things a little more pleasant, a little more fun to get through the outage. I mean, all your classic entertainments are available, you know, books, board games, cards, playing a musical instrument. These are all things that you should have on hand, know how to do, and have some around that you enjoy. Have some board games you like. If you hate Scrabble and that's all you got, well, that's not much fun. So pick out some things that you like and enjoy playing. It's not a bad idea to do that anyways. I think we're too connected to the internet as it is, as you watch me on YouTube. But I think it's good for a family or a couple to have offline entertainment to begin with. But either way, make sure you have some plan to keep yourself entertained and for your downtime, because your morale and your health both depend on you being relaxed and being able to blow off a little steam and take your mind off of your immediate troubles. Let's talk about alternative sources of electricity. Just because the power grid is down doesn't mean you don't have access to any electricity. There's things you can do to mitigate that. The most obvious is a generator, whether gasoline powered or propane powered. It's the traditional response to losing power. It's not perfect. You need to have fuel for it, and if your fuel runs out in a long-term outage, it may be difficult to find more fuel. If you do have a limited resource of fuel and it looks like things are going to stretch out for a while, think about rationing it. Maybe use a generator 2 or 3 times a day to cool off your refrigerator and charge some other devices. Another downside to generators is security related. If you have a generator running, especially in a neighborhood, a suburban neighborhood, an urban area, but anywhere really, people can hear that. And if the outage has dragged on long enough that people are getting desperate, that may draw attention to you that you don't want drawn to you. So be judicious with your use of a generator. If you don't know how long an outage is going to be, assume it's going to be long and act accordingly. That way you're not surprised and run out of fuel in 2 days when you thought the power was coming on in 1. Another option that's more and more popular all the time is what they call solar generators. They're not really solar generators, they're battery banks that usually have a solar panel that charges them, that you can charge them with. And these are great. They go all the way from small ones that you can use to keep your devices charged, your phones, your batteries, your LED lights, things like that. At a minimum, you should probably have one of those because it's just really nice to not have to start your car every time you want to charge your phone or charge your lights back up. And they're not that expensive. The smaller ones are $200 to $300 for one that can keep your devices charged, that come with a solar panel to charge it throughout the day. But they make them all the way up to ones that will charge and power most of your house. And these prices can go from $5,000 to $10,000 for a unit that big, with panels that can keep it mostly charged. But my advice is get the biggest one you can afford. You're always going to be glad to have more power, and if you don't have enough, that's going to be a problem, but it's never a problem to have more power than you need. Another advantage is they're silent, so there's not a security issue other than people visually seeing your panels out, but it will keep from drawing unwanted attention to you in the case of a extended outage when people are starting to get a little worried about how they're going to take care of their own families. A note on generators, both solar and gas, doesn't matter. If you're generating your own power and you're hooking into your house, you have to do it right. A lot of people will just take an extension cord and plug that into an outlet in the house and power back through that to the panel. That's a terrible idea. It's not safe, and it can actually send the voltage down the line. So if the linemen are repairing the line downstream from you, they may have their power secured and you're putting power to the grid through your generator. You may wind up hurting, injuring, or killing a lineman that's trying to restore power. Do not hook your battery up, your generator up improperly into your home circuit, because if you backfeed the main line, that can really hurt somebody. What you should do if you want to run off your circuits is get a switch. I forget the name of it. It's a disconnect switch, transfer switch. Get a transfer switch installed by a qualified electrician. What that will do is your generator will plug into the transfer switch, which will plug into your panel, and you won't be physically able to be connected to the grid and the generator at the same time. And you can power as many circuits off of that switch as the generator can handle, but all you have to do is switch it and turn your generator on, and your power will work without backfeeding down a line and being dangerous. Again, carbon monoxide. Do not run a gasoline or propane generator inside the house. Carbon monoxide kills. Let's talk specifically about a long-term outage. This is going to be something caused by major damage like the hurricanes in North Carolina last year, or by deliberate attack like a cyber attack or warfare, or by a solar event, maybe something, a solar flare can knock out a massive amount of grid at one time, and it may be a long time till it's repaired. So let's say we've got a long-term power outage. We're talking weeks or months before you're likely to get power back. One of the main things that you're going to want to do is have cash. Cash is king. If the power goes out, credit cards won't work, debit cards won't work, ATMs won't work. Cash will work. After a certain period of time, people may not accept cash anymore either, but certainly in the beginning of a major event, you'll be able to spend cash more likely than electronic forms of payment. You want to have your cash that you keep on hand in small amounts. You don't want all hundreds, because if you're buying a $10 bottle of water, they're not going to have $90 in change most of the time. So you want to keep a large amount of money in small bills. How much money, people ask? That's really a tough one. I know it's hard for a lot of us, myself included, to set aside a large amount of cash. I think it'd be ideal to have several $100s at least, especially when you figure that prices are probably going to go up if you're in a major long-term power outage situation. Chances are cost of goods is going to go higher than what it is now. But have as much cash as you can comfortably have set aside. Gasoline is another thing that you might want to put by for a long-term outage. Without electricity, gas pumps don't work. And also, you're going to have the same problem with point-of-sale systems not working. So if you don't have cash, or the gas station just isn't able to take payment, they may not be selling gas. If it's a long-term, major, widespread event, gas may not come back into the station to refill the tanks in the first place, even if they are selling it. So if you could store some gas for your vehicles and your generators, that's a great idea. Finally, the biggest thing you can do, as in any disaster, is prepare mentally. You need to sit down before these things happen and think about, if I didn't have electricity, what that I'm doing right now will I not be able to do? What will I need to do, and how can I resolve that issue? If you've thought about it, you've went through it in your head, you've played what if, what if I have no power? What if I need to cook? I don't have any power. What if the stores aren't selling food because there's no power? What if I run out of gas for my car? What if? If you think about these things before it happens in any situation, then when it does happen, it's not the first time you've seen it. You'll have had some chance to work through in your brain a little bit. You'll have made some plans, you'll have seen some holes, and you'll be a little more ready to go. Skills cannot be taken from you. If you're away from your preps, you still got your skills. You always got your skills, you always got your thoughts, your ideas, and being mentally prepared is more than half of the game. All right, each of these subject areas could have a video of their own all by themselves. So we're going to do that as we move ahead. Look for more in-depth videos on specific topics. Let me know what you'd like me to do. Put down in the comments. You got a topic you want to know about or something you think I should cover? Put it down in the comments. I'd love to know. Let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what you think about power outage preparedness. Let me know what you've done to make you and your family ready. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and your questions. Until then, stay safe, stay ready.